Hello and welcome to GCE-US 101. We're just going to wait for another minute or so and then we will get started.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Jennifer Rigg. I serve as the Executive Director at the Global Campaign for Education US, based in the Washington, DC area. And we're so delighted that you could join us today on Giving Tuesday for GCE-US 101. We're live streaming as well as having an informal, fun conversation today. And we'd love to hear from all of you as to where you're Zooming in from. If you're joining within Zoom, please share in the chat box your location, introduce yourself. We'd love to hear from each of you. We really welcome all of you, no matter where you are. If you have engaged with GCE-US for many years, or if you are just getting to know us and wondering what on earth that acronym stands for. So we're the Global Campaign for Education US, and our mission is to promote education as a basic human right and to mobilize to create political will in the United States as well as internationally to ensure universal, quality, inclusive education, which is at the core of all human development. And we'll share in the chat box the web address where you can learn more about our work. And for people joining in other formats, you can learn more about GCUS online at gce-us.org. And with that, we have such a fantastic conversation lined up for all of you today. Really wonderful partners from around the globe and around the Global Campaign for Education family. We're really excited to start the conversation. And it's my honor to introduce Taylor Rogers, who is a fellow and previous youth leader with GCE-US and across the GCE movement. She'll share a little bit more coming up here on her background. But Taylor wonderfully organized this event today as a way to really help invite all of you and encourage you to invite people across your networks to get involved in the Education for All movement. So welcome, Taylor. Please share a little bit more about yourself and your role at GCE-US.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. So like you mentioned, I began with GCE-US as a youth advocacy leader and later became a fellow as I was working on my master's in development studies at the University of Sussex in England, which I just wrapped up in September. And now as a fellow, I work on youth outreach and advocacy, as well as a multitude of other advocacy efforts that we will talk a bit more about today at GCE-US.
Fantastic. Thank you, Taylor. Can you provide an overview of GCE-US, help people who might be new to the organization to understand the work that we do?
Yes, so at GCE-US, we are both a campaign and a coalition. You might have heard a bit of that language already, and you'll hear a bit more about that language today. And so we are the Global Campaign for Education US, meaning that we are working on advocacy efforts in order to promote global education within the US at the federal level, within Congress, USAID, State Department, and you'll hear from Anna Roberts from USAID just after me. And then we're also a coalition. So we're an organization, we bring together organizations from across the US in order to promote that global education advocacy, both in the US and then also internationally. So we work with organizations like Education Cannot Wait and Global Partnership from Education. You'll hear from both of those today. In order to make sure that there is education for all around the globe.
Thank you so much, Taylor. And thanks to all the partners joining us today. We're really excited. What is your why, if you will, Taylor? Why do you do this work and what draws you to it? How did you get involved in the Education for All movement?
So initially, just getting a better understanding of the importance for education. I took a university class during college, and we were discussing the Khmer Rouge and in Cambodia and the genocide there. And it really stuck out to me how the genocide initially targeted teachers. There was an understanding and a fear of the power of education and knowledge within that genocide, and it really made me realize how education is something that should not be a privilege. It should be for everyone, and then within that, it's something that can never be taken away from you. So there's a lot of power in not only being able to live your fullest life if you have education, but also to be able to create change for all. So that's kind of was my initial inspiration, as well as just a multitude of other things showing me the power of education. And then from there, I managed to get introduced to GCE-US and become a youth advocacy leader, which I was really able to be trained and get a better understanding about how I can create change here in the US so that more people can have access to an education as well.
Thank you so much, Taylor. Thanks for sharing your reason for doing this work and what initially helped to engage you. And we're going to hear more from Taylor in a little bit as she and I co-moderate throughout the GCE-US 101 session today. If you're just joining, thank you for tuning in. You just heard from Taylor Rogers that our next wonderful speaker is Anna Roberts. She's the Senior Advisor to the Deputy Assistant Administrator at the Center for Education and the Bureau for Development, Democracy, and Innovation at USAID. And we'll hear a little bit more from Anna directly, starting with sharing a little bit more about herself and her connection to GCE-US and this broader work together. Welcome, Anna. We're so delighted that you could join today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here to tell a little bit more about how USAID works with GCE and a little bit about myself, because I feel like I know this community so well, so excited to hear more about people learning more about it. It's been near and dear to my heart for quite some time. I actually started my career on the Hill, working for a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and then was working at the Basic Education Coalition. So I was actually thinking, Jennifer, this morning, I was like, I think we go back like 15 years now, back when you were at 1,000 Days and as an interaction. And, you know, it's a tight-knit group of people who are really dedicated to this. So I was trying to think back. I was like, I think it's been almost 15 years since we started working together. So glad to be here this morning.
Thank you so much. You're absolutely right. It's wonderful. And what I love about this work too is that people can join no matter where you are in your career, in your life cycle. We really want people from students all the way to, you know, professionals, retirees, families, you name it, joining in, because education is so critical for all of us. Thank you, Anna. You're absolutely right. Thanks again for being with us. Please share a little bit more about yourself and your connection to GCE-US.
So worked with GCE-US on multiple sides, but I think right now probably the what people probably want to hear most about is my experience at USAID. I've been at USAID for about 6 years now as the Senior Advisor for Policy and Strategy, as well as the Senior Advisor for our Deputy Assistant Administrator. And in that time, I've been able to help roll out the US government strategy on international basic education, as well as the education policy. And once we developed that strategy, I was able to help implement it across the 10 agencies that work on education. And I think sometimes people know that USAID is the lead, but that there are a lot of other agencies that do this as well. And one of our goals is to make sure that we're coordinating, that we're leveraging resources, because there's so many pieces of the pie. You know, our programs at DOL focusing on child labor and making sure that they have educational access. Once we've addressed child labor issues, to USDA and making sure that the nutrition components are there, because obviously kids can't learn if they come to school hungry. And so looking at this really holistically, but knowing we can't do all of it. And so how can we really leverage what the US government can bring to the table, as well as working with our partners, our multilateral partners, our bilateral partners, and then learning from you all. And I think for me, that's one of the most important things that we can do. When we were developing the strategy, GCE was really pivotal in helping us bring together groups of folks so that we could look retrospectively at what the last policy accomplished, what some of the challenges were, the lessons learned, and to think through those things so that when we were looking forward, it could be as strong of a product as possible. And now we're looking at kind of the next iteration of where we want to go and the impact of COVID and what that means for programs. And so, looking to you all who are on the ground, who have this amazing experience that we can really learn from. And so I think GCE has this really unique opportunity and experience, and you guys do it really well, of bringing folks together to have some of those conversations that we know at USAID you all might not feel comfortable having in front of us, and we get that. We want you all to feel as comfortable as possible. Email me anytime, and I love to chat. But we also know sometimes those conversations are a little bit easier with each other, and also, it gives you an opportunity to take off your institutional hat, to come together and figure out what are the policy challenges, what should we be recommending, and to dig into that and also just learn from each other in a way that is like kind of a safe way to do that. And so at USAID, we try to create a lot of opportunities for ways to engage, so if it's sending us something in writing or if it's having face-to-face dialogues with coalitions, we love to do that. We'd love to hear from you no matter the size of your organization. We try to make sure that it's from the smallest to the largest. That's something that you'll hear Administrator Power talk about, that we need to not keep talking to the same people, that we need to engage different partners because all voices are important. And so I think GCE is a really important part of that, of making sure that we have a way to engage all of those voices to come up with new and creative things. Because, sometimes when you've been doing this too long, it's hard to be creative about new and inventive ways to do this. And if we really want to ensure that we are reaching all children with the best quality education, especially the most marginalized and vulnerable, it's really through those conversations that we'll be able to tackle those challenges. So,
thank you so much, Anna. And as you can all tell, it's a real pleasure building those partnerships and being able to work together in real time. And thanks to Taylor for sharing in the chat box the link to what Anna just mentioned about the current US government strategy on international basic education. And we'll also share, thanks to Anna and her colleagues, there's a wonderful new USAID education progress report, and we'll make sure everybody's invited. There's an exciting new event coming up later this month where you can learn more about that in collaboration with our friends at the Basic Education Coalition. And then Anna and her colleagues have also done fantastic work on the US government-wide COVID-19 international basic education response. Is there anything else you want to share, Anna, about what motivates you? What is your why, so to speak? Why do you do this work and what draws you to it?
So my why actually goes back a long time to why I actually started this. But personally, I'll just note that I have two young children. I have a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old. And the pandemic and teaching at home, I think, gave everybody a very unique sense of why education and children going to school is so important, because that was tiring. But, seeing the opportunity that my children have and making sure that that's something that all children have, especially girls. But my why, in terms of how I actually got started in this, actually started when I was 18. I was a senior in high school, and for some reason, looking back, I cannot believe my parents let me do this, but they let me go to Haiti with a group, and it was my first time out of the country. It was actually my first time on an airplane. So I was sheltered, very sheltered, but I went to Haiti to actually help build a playground. And it was part of the only school in the area in this very small village on the west side, west tip of Haiti. And you got to see the impact that the school had and the hope that it brought everyone. But it really hit home. I was actually walking with a little boy. He's actually not little, he was a teenager, but his name was Evanchois. And we were talking about what he wanted and his hopes and his dreams. And an older man approached us. And in Haiti, as you all might know, machetes are very common there, very large knives, and he was very angry that I was there. And he came up and started yelling in Creole, and I didn't quite know, but it was very obvious he didn't want me there. And even Chua actually put himself in between us and stopped him and explained to him that we were there to help and the opportunity that the school was going to bring him because he wanted to be a doctor. And it was just one of those life-changing moments of how important it was to him. And so I changed my major and went to college and decided this was what I wanted to do. So. Yep,
Anna, thank you for sharing that powerful story and for your service. We are so grateful. Thanks to all of your colleagues across U.S. government and to all of the advocates with GCE-US and partners. We're so grateful to you for joining us today. And Anna mentioned, thank you so much. Anna mentioned the great work that USAID and others support with the Global Partnership for Education. So we're going to shift next to Surtaj Kaur, who is the Global Advocacy Public Policy Lead at the Global Partnership for Education. Welcome, Surtaj. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and your connection to GCE-US and this work.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jennifer. As you mentioned, so I work at the Global Partnership for Education on the advocacy team, and I lead our global public policy engagements at major platforms like the G7, UNGA, COP. So there's a lot of sort of advocacy at that level of getting the highest level political will for education. And just to sort of, for those who don't know about GPE, just a very quick introduction. We are a fund and a partnership of key stakeholders in education, and we support countries with financing to transform education systems. But in order to transform education systems, we recognize that we have to work with all stakeholders that sort of form the complexity of education systems, right? So that's governments and donors, multilateral, civil society, teachers, private sector, etc. So, our goal is by mobilizing financing and by mobilizing this partnership that we can sort of ensure a quality education for every child. And in that, I think there's a very clear alignment with the work that GCE-US does, right? And so we work together on several things. And I think the thing that sort of comes together to mind most recently was the Global Education Summit. And you very helpfully actually helped us mobilize I think a $305 million contribution from the United States government. So, exactly the work that Anna was just talking about. So this was part of the total $4 billion that were raised at the Global Education Summit. And all of these contributions support developing countries in driving policies and implementing programs that really bring about a change in education systems, and especially for the most marginalized children. So in a way, I think we've collaborated to make that sort of impact at scale, and we have been collaborating for many years now.
Thank you so much, and huge thanks to everybody who made that possible. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share about work that we have done and could do together with even more people joining in today? And how would you like to see individuals or organizations get involved? Thanks.
Yeah, no, I think the one thing that I think we've seen over the years is that, financing to education remains a key challenge, right? And it feels like, well, why do we keep talking about financing? But the truth is that if you don't put money into education systems, nothing moves, right? And so in a way, the fact that aid to education has been falling over the years is deeply challenging. That COVID has obviously made that worse is, it really should give us pause, because now we're hearing numbers like over 11 million girls will not return to school. 13 million kids will be married early, and that has direct correlations to the kids that go to school or don't go to school, right? So you're married early if you don't go to school. And so, I think that sort of fundamental aspect of trying to move funding to education is really important in both ways, right? So on the one hand, of course, moving funding from the donor level, but also moving funding in domestic financing, which is something that GP does as well, right? So incentivizing and supporting and advocating for countries themselves to invest in education and to increase their financing for education. So sort of bringing that back to the question that you just asked, I think that, that this public pressure and demand is so important in creating the political will that we need to really move things at the systems level, right? And it sounds vague. It's like, well, what do I do? Do I go out with a placard and like stand in the streets? Well, actually, yeah, people are listening and institutions are listening and politicians are listening. And it feels like it's not important, or it feels like it goes into the ether, but it really doesn't. And we see those impacts at the highest levels, at these sort of global forums. We see that at country level. So I think, just in the way that we sort of collaborated with you and many other amazing organizations in the US to mobilize funding for the Global Education Summit, I think it's so important to keep that focus on education at a time that I think education is facing the most critical crisis in decades.
Thank you. Clearly, we're so lucky for your leadership, you and your colleagues across the GPE Secretariat and partnership as well. Do you want to share a little bit more about what brought you into this work? What is your why? What draws you to education advocacy?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in India, and so I've completed all of my education in India except my master's. And in a way, it's so obvious when you live in a country with that much inequality and that much sort of people lacking, that education is that sort of means and that vehicle to get you from the place that you are to the place that you want to be, whether that is in terms of economic and financial progress, or if it's in terms of like thinking and critical thinking, engaging with society, engaging at a personal level, at a political level. And so I think, to me, it was very clear from the time that I was young that education is such an important vehicle for social progress. Right. And I think that that education is a bridge between the world that we live in and the world that we want to create. That's really crucial for me, because I believe in a world with more justice and equality, where we can address climate change, where children are healthy. And I truly believe that education is that sort of really fundamental building block. I've seen it in India, like communities that progress, it really is based on the education that they receive. And also to think about, to not to get too ideal here, but I think, when we think about the world that we want to create over the next 30 years, over the next 50 years, it's starting with education, right? And it's starting with sort of giving children the tools that they need to be able to process the world that they're in and to be able to critically engage with it. So yeah, I think that's, for me, the reason I work on education.
Thank you so much. Such a powerful story, and thank you for sharing really your personal experience. And again, thank you for your amazing leadership. Taylor has shared in the chat box the web address for people to learn more about the Global Partnership for Education at globalpartnership.org. And Sertaj, if there's anything else you'd like to share in the chat box, feel free. We're so grateful to you for joining today. Thank you so much. And Sertaj just mentioned some of the amazing work that's happening around the globe, from protests to advocacy at the highest possible levels. And we're really delighted that our colleague Dorothy Monza with Results, fantastic advocacy associate at Results, which is one of the organizations that has been part of the GCE-US coalition since the very beginning, helped incubate and host GCE-US. So we're so thrilled, Dorothy, that you could join us today to share your perspective. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and your connection to GCE-US.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. And as you said, Results is a grassroots movement, and we work on education, including with GCE-US from the beginning. And at its heart, Results is a movement of passionate, committed, everyday people. Together, they use their voices to influence political decisions that will bring an end to poverty. And as many of us on this call know, that quality education is completely foundational to that work. not only is it a human right with benefits that go beyond learning, but when children can learn and learn well, they have the keys to a more just and equal future. And so it's been great to work with GCE-US because we know they share this commitment, the commitment to achieving education for all, especially for the most impoverished and marginalized. So we've been working together for years to generate political will and get policy and funding commitments to further this shared goal.
Thank you so much, Dorothy, and thanks to everybody across the Results family. What are your interactions with GCE-US as a coalition member and partner? How does GCE-US help support your work, and how would you describe the ways that we're able to achieve positive impact together?
Great question. When I started at Results, one of my colleagues told me that basically what you need to know about advocacy is that it's about showing up, speaking out, and never ever going away. Or more briefly, persistence usually pays off. And GCE-US is a great example of an organization that shows up and doesn't go away. You know, year after year, they're steadfastly committed to achieving the right to education. And so you know, as advocates, we know that significant policy and funding victories can take years to come to fruition. I think of it of like, if an ice cube is in a 0-degree room and we warm it 1 degree per year, it will seem like it starts melting, you know, at 33 degrees, but everything leading up to that moment where it looked like it was still frozen, that was all contributing to the breakthrough. So when I think of some of our biggest wins, you know, I think of the work that Results in GCE-US did towards passage of the READ Act, which, you know, was introduced over many years. And including, you know, our annual appropriations work. Every year we go to the Hill, we work to build congressional champions and get more funding for global education. And in FY20, we secured a $75 million boost for global education. So that's an example of something we're constantly pushing. We're constantly working towards these goals and building on what's been done before, and kind of on the shoulders of giants. But that's how I like to think of our work with GCE-US, is that we're in this for the long run, and we're committed to building our partnership and building our power over multiple years, and just, you know, doing what it takes to achieve our goal.
Amazing. Thank you, Dorothy. And huge thanks to you and everybody who's made that possible. Anything else that you'd like to share about how others can get involved in the GCE-US Coalition and advocacy with policymakers?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say any individuals who are on the call or listening, if any part of you is pulled to advocacy or curious, I would encourage you to jump in. It seems intimidating until you do it. But, you know, in a lot of ways, you might not consider you can already be an advocate in a lot of other areas of your life. And if you have a story of how education or lack of education has impacted you or your community, then you already have all the qualifications you need to be an advocate. And groups like GCE-US and Results will help train you how to use your voice and what actions to take. And I know Jennifer and Taylor will share a way that you can get linked up to take action with GCE-US online. So we'd encourage that at the bare minimum, because it's a great way to be involved and to have an impact, even if you don't have time to commit to long-term volunteering. And I would say for organizations, you know, GCE-US makes it very easy to be involved. They really convene a broad coalition of folks. And so even if your organization works on one aspect of education, you know, we can still find creative ways to work together or different ways that our sectors are related. I know Anna mentioned nutrition. And so I would just encourage everyone to think about how foundational education is, and then to join us in partnership, because it is a great coalition and a very worthy goal.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. We're so grateful to you for your leadership. And
thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. Dorothy mentioned some of the work that we're doing globally together. One of the wonderful pieces that we'll go into a bit more depth now with our colleague coming from the Global Campaign for Education Secretariat in Johannesburg, South Africa, is the work that we do across over 100 countries, building knowledge, advocacy, research, and tools together. So we're really delighted to welcome Ashanti Kunene, the Advocacy and Research Officer with the Global Campaign for Education Secretariat. Welcome.
Hi, Jen. Thank you so much.
Thanks for
We're so
having
glad
me.
thank you for joining us. And please share a little bit more about yourself and your connection to this work.
Okay, so I'm, as Jen said, the Research and Advocacy Officer at the Global Campaign for Education Secretariat. I'm actually based in Cape Town because the ocean is necessary, not in Joburg. And it is obviously through my day job that I got introduced to you and your amazing team, which is so great because I think the GCE-US is such a beacon for committed, consistent praxis in education activism. So thank you for doing what you do. You obviously lead our inclusive education community practice and part of the broader movement. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And like Ashanti just mentioned, our colleague, doctoral fellow Stephanie Pena will share a little bit more in a bit about the inclusive education and early childhood community of practice as well. Ashanti, do you mind sharing a bit about how the different GCE coalition partners around the globe connect to each other and support each other?
Sure. So the GCE represents over 100 national and regional education coalitions, international organizations, teachers organizations, parents associations, women's groups, disabled youth, and I mean, the list goes. And so we support each other by fostering collaboration, networking, engaging in policy, dialogue, research projects, and shared learning exchanges to really strengthen our impact at the national and regional levels and to influence international frameworks and debates around education. We also have the annual GAWE, or Global Action Week, where we bring all our members from all over the world together and where we engage and we learn from each other. And people can get involved with the work that we do by obviously attending webinars and seminars like this, learning events, applying for vacancies. If you actually want a job, go on the website or apply to be a member as a civil society organization. Subscribe to the monthly newsletter or take one of our online courses on the e-learning hub that we have. You know, social media is also a good tool to keep up to date with what the GCE is doing at the global level. So, yeah.
Beautiful. And thanks for helping people quickly know how they can get involved with the GCE movement. And my apologies, we're with you in spirit in Cape Town, and increasingly people can do this work from anywhere around the globe, which is really empowering. The GCE Secretariat is in Johannesburg with global presence and reach around the country and around the globe. So Ashanti, what helped you get into this work in the first place? What draws you to this work and encouraged you to get involved in your current role?
Here's the existential question. This is the existential question of the why. So just a quick summary then would be in terms of my background. So I'm an international relations graduate from Stellenbosch University, which is arguably the spiritual and epistemic birthplace of apartheid, which I hope I don't need to explain what that is. But during my time there, I was the vice chairwoman of the United Nations Association chapter, which is where I also started doing a lot of work with the UN around youth engagement in the SDGs that were about to be implemented in 2015. And at the same time, I was elected head student of the largest co-ed residence on campus. I was one of only 2 head students of color out of about 53 students that were part of the official structures of student leadership at the university. And this was around 2015, 2016, when the Fees Must Fall student movement was at its peak. So in holding both a local and a global student leadership position during this decolonial turn, I suppose, in my country, it really forced me to figure out what it is I wanted to do with my life and what my why is. And I left university being quite clear that I wanted to engage in critical narrative change work. I wanted to shape narratives, imagine alternative realities, create new stories about who we are as people, engage people in open, honest, difficult dialogues that shift our thinking away from the absolute mediocrity and poverty of thought that is binary thinking towards more life-affirming, nuanced modalities of being and thinking. So that essentially is my why and, what draws me to this work. And then fast forward a few years, I found myself speaking at a UNESCO panel about how we needed to decolonize the human in human rights education. And I must have left an impression because the man that moderated that conversation is now my boss, Werner Muniz. He's the
policy and advocacy campaigns lead at the GCE Secretariat. So I had never heard of the GCE before I got the email. But when I found out that it is a global civil society movement with the sole mission of promoting and protecting education as a basic human right, I was just like, all the yes. This is amazing. This is exciting because so few people actually understand what it means to understand education as a basic human right, because we're all busy building human capital. So anything to be able to be epistemically disobedient at this global level and really just try and shift narratives around what education is supposed to mean and do for people, you know. So yeah, that's my why.
Thank you so much for sharing that across time zones. We're so grateful to you for joining us today. And I'm thrilled to, thank you very much. I'm thrilled to hand off to Taylor Rogers, the brilliant fellow at GCE-US who organized this entire conversation today. Over to you, Taylor.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank you for moderating the first half of the panel. So now I'm going to turn over to work with, or to speak with Mary Jacob Quosa. And she is a youth advocacy leader with the Global Partnership for Education, as well as the executive director to Whisper to Humanity. She'll tell you a bit more about that. And we actually got to meet in person in Nepal in 2018 when we were both youth leaders and at the Youth Caucus for the Global Campaign for Education coalition meetings. That was really wonderful. So Mary Jacob, thank you for joining us. And I was hoping you could open it up by just telling us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Taylor. And I would say it's been amazing sitting here listening to all you amazing women. So my name is Mary Jacob, like Taylor rightly said, and I'm a very troublesome person. Not troublesome in the real sense, but yeah, I'm in love with disruption. I'm a very intersectional feminist and I'm an education advocate. Presently a youth leader with Global Partnership for Education and the founder and executive director of Whisper to Humanity, which is a very exciting youth-led platform that I'm very proud of, by the way. And yes, basically I'm in love with everything that would cause change and give us a beautiful world that we want to see. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's really wonderful. Could you tell us a little bit about your why and what draws you to this work? You said you like causing trouble. Could you tell us a little about that?
Okay, yeah. So I think it goes to wanting to see the change that you want to see. So from a very young age, I know from a very young age, people already called me a feminist, even before I knew what the word was. And I always wanted a solution to the problems that we face as young women, as women in general. And yeah, along the line, I think Taylor, it has to be back in 2018 during the GCE Youth Caucus. I figured out that I needed something. I needed to advocate for something very powerful enough to give us the freedom that we need as women and to break the shackles. And I realized that thing was building the knowledge and capacity of women, and that was education. So for me, it has always, my love to bridge the gap keeps me going every day of my life. Like I tell people, the development space is not a space you can be in if you're not passionate about it. You're going to get frustrated at some point and run away. But yeah, my desire to bridge the gaps and make the world a better place for women keeps me going. And understanding that education is that thing that could bridge this whole gap, is that thing that could give women back the power, is that thing that could give us all we need to take up our space. And that makes me prioritize education in everything that I do, including in the work that we are doing with Whisper to Humanity. Education is totally prioritized. And of course, in my role as a GPU leader, it is something I wake up every day and find ways to add my voice to make sure that we bridge the gap and we do something amazing so that every child, every girl can have access to quality education, have access to that power, that knowledge that can enable her be who she wants to be and take up the space the way she wants to take it up. Yes, so basically, I did a lot of engagement in the university space. But yes, even at that point, I didn't feel like, okay, education advocacy was it. I just knew that I wanted a better space, education space for women and girls. I was part of those who led a campaign in my school, the Safe City campaign with ActionAid Nigeria. And we were able to do amazing things like creating a safer space for young girls in my university. Which saw the invention of getting more security agencies, installing more street lights in the school spaces, and finding new laws and new principles to better guide the school environment and protect more women and girls. So for me, when I was doing that, I felt like, yeah, I was doing something amazing for women. I was trying to make sure that I would feel safe, my friends would feel safe, and in the nearest future, my nieces and my daughters would as well feel safe. But I didn't call it education advocacy. But today, I know it's education advocacy. I know making the education space safe and productive for girls gives girls more energy, more knowledge, and gives them more of the space they need to actualize what they need to actualize, and of course to bridge the gender gap. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really powerful. What do you wish everyone knew about global education advocacy?
Okay, so coming from the context that I come from like, I work in a very grassroots level across the nation and stuff. And people feel like when you're talking about global advocacy, global education, you're saying broad, and they feel like it's not enough, and they feel like it's not what we need. But I really wish that people understood that the world decisions are made on global levels. I wish people understood that the power in everything that we have and we can have is in that upper space. I wish more young people can get involved in making decisions. Like during the Global Education Summit earlier in the year with GPE, I know my president went and made a lot of wishes and a lot of promises on what to do on the global platform. And this was pushed out of so many advocacies on the global level, and so many things that were put in, so many words that were put in on the global level to make it happen. But the truth is, because very limited young, even education advocates are very interested and involved in what is happening in the global level of advocacy for education, it makes it difficult for us to pass this knowledge. It makes it difficult for an average young Nigerian education advocate to know that my president did this, and we could actually hold this man to his words, and we could campaign, and we could ask for accountability. So sincerely, I feel at the global level, the global education advocacy is that point where we make the major decisions, is that point where we can make the major changes in our education system, is that point where we can take our future in our hands. And I wish everybody could get more involved.
Thank you so much. Those were really powerful words. And there was a lot of similar things that I remember us talking about at the Global Campaign for Education Youth Caucus in 2018 too.
Right.
So it's nice that we're still talking about it. We're still pushing for it. So thank you very much for joining us from Nigeria across time zones. And we're now going to move on to Julie Mcpherson. She's the Director of Advocacy and Operations at Jesuit Refugee Service USA, and also chairs the Education in Emergencies Working Group. So thank you for joining us, Julia.
Thanks for having me, Taylor. It's great to be here.
So if you could just get started by telling us a little bit about yourself and your connection to GCE-US.
Sure. So as Taylor said, I'm the Director of Advocacy and Operations at Jesuit Refugee Service USA. I'm based here in Washington, D.C. We are an international Catholic humanitarian organization focused specifically on working with refugees and other forcibly displaced persons. We operate in about 50 different countries and serve about 1 million refugees every year. And a core part of our work is offering education services to those that we serve. So we work in educational settings from pre-primary through higher ed, so pre-primary, primary, secondary, and post-secondary, including formal higher education and other kinds of livelihoods, vocational trainings, etc. So education is a core part of what we do at JRS, and we are proud to be members of GCE-US.
Thank you. What are your interactions with GCE-US as a coalition partner? How does GCE-US help support your work, and how do we achieve positive impact together? How do you see that from your perspective?
So GCE-US has really been a critical part of our advocacy work. So I started at JRS about 6 years ago, and that was at the beginning of our effort around doing more of a broader campaign focused on our education work. So not only programmatically were we trying to invest more funds in our education programming, but we wanted to partner up with other organizations and invest a bit more concretely in our advocacy work as it relates to education. Just, advocacy is a core part of our organizational mission. We know that not only can we create change through direct service, but by tackling issues that are systemic to challenges, creating challenges to accessing education in the settings where we work. And the way to really do that is through advocacy by working with host governments, donor governments, other partners to really create broader change. So one of the first things we did, frankly, was to join GCE-US and meet up with other organizations, other members that were interested in working on education in emergencies and crisis settings more specifically. One of the first things we did was just sort of brainstorm, what are some of the challenges with a particular focus on the US government and the US government role in developing policy and providing funding for these kinds of programs. So we organized meetings with various government agencies to talk about how we can work better together to address some of these challenges. Around that time, Education Cannot Wait was launching, and I know folks have heard a bit about that and are familiar with Education Cannot Wait, and the US government was one of the first donor governments at the table as ECW was being developed and launched. So we were really able to play a significant role in making sure that the US government was understood that civil society and organizations that were working on these issues were really hopeful that the US government would stay engaged in ECW. Through our advocacy efforts, we were able to secure a $25 million appropriation through the annual appropriations process. And we've seen that appropriation sustain itself for 3 years now. We're hoping that it'll grow over the coming years. That was a huge win as advocates and as GCE-US advocates to be able to achieve that goal and secure that funding. So I think we're just at the beginning. Really happy that we're able to work together to make these things happen. And unfortunately, the challenges, remain and increase with over half of refugee school-age children out of school. So we need to continue to work on this as much as we can.
Great, thank you so much. Those are all really important things that you're working on and that we are excited to be working on together. Could you give a little bit more information on how people can get involved with the Education Emergencies Working Group?
Right, so we have this sort of smaller subset of organizations within GCE-US who, again, are interested in working on education and emergencies, in particular, this working group that we stood up a few years ago now. And we work really hand in hand with our appropriations working group. And a lot of our work is focused again on the US government and trying to sustain policy and funding for these kinds of programs. So anyone interested in working with us can certainly reach out to me directly. I'll put my information in the chat. Or reach out to anyone at GCE-US to see if you'd like to get involved. If you're already a part of the appropriation subgroup, again, we talk about a lot of these issues within that community as well. So that's a great way to get involved. But we'd love to just stay involved and stay engaged. And if you have any questions, feel free to let me know directly.
Great, thank you so much for joining us, Julia, and for all that really helpful information.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone.
All right, so next we're going to turn to a member of our staff. Krista Gisika is the coordinator for GCE-US. So if you would like to join me, Krista, Great, hello. So if you could kick off by just telling us a little bit about yourself and your role at GCE-US.
Sure, and thank you for moderating this conversation today, Taylor. It's been wonderful. So my name is Krista Gisika, as Taylor mentioned, and I serve as coordinator at the Global Campaign for Education US. My sort of journey, to say that, into international education began both with growing up internationally, and then I tutored a lot during university for speakers of other languages, and then ended up teaching in rural Brazil with Fulbright. And then after that, I went on to work with our coalition partner, Build On, working at the community level in Senegal, Malawi, Haiti, Nepal, and Nicaragua, partnering with communities to build elementary schools in their villages. So these firsthand experiences of witnessing education inequalities and access issues, particularly for girls and children with disabilities, led me to pursue my master's in education, gender, and international development at the University College London, the Institute of Education there. And at GCE-US, I have the privilege of wearing many different hats. We're a very small organization focused on international basic education advocacy. So this includes organizing our monthly coalition meetings, our biweekly US government advocacy calls, and supporting with the inclusive education and early childhood community of practice meetings. I really enjoy the process of interacting with a range of stakeholders. We get to hear both from government officials and those working at the USAID and agency level, as well as small grassroots organizations just getting started and supporting them with their capacity. So it's really fascinating to constantly be hearing from people passionate about education, working in different spaces. So that's a bit about that.
Great, thank you. And so I was curious if you could tell us a little bit more about what people can do to work towards gender equitable education. I know that you are so passionate about girls' education. And so could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Thank you. I think it's important to recognize, first of all, that access to high quality inclusive education, although it is a human right, is not a reality for many around the world, and especially for girls and children with disabilities. I really think that through our coalition, we have the benefit of having so many different organizations that are really experts in different fields. And within our coalition and partners that we worked closely with, we have Amplify Girls, Age Africa, and we've also worked very closely with Malala Fund and the UN Girls Education Initiative, who are experts. And I would recommend that if someone is interested in learning more about girls' education or issues around gender transformative education, that they first look to organizations who are experts in the field and learn how to best support them. I think it's really critical that organizations are directly working with the stakeholders that they wish to empower and including their leadership at the forefront of decisions. And so first of all, going to the websites of Amplify Girls, Age Africa, Malala Fund, the UN Girls Education Initiative, following them on social media and getting involved in their advocacy calls is really a great way to start. So.
Thank you so much. And thank you for speaking with us today. We're going to move on to Shrutinalapa, who is also a part of our team. So she's a senior fellow with GCE-US. Hello, Shruti. If you could start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself and your work with GCE-US.
Sure, thanks, Taylor. Hi, everyone. My name is Shrutinalapa. I'm a senior fellow with GCE-US, and I'm also a second-year master's student at George Washington University studying international affairs. My journey with GCE-US started right at the end of 2019. I was about to graduate from undergrad and had previous experience working with refugees and also on the Hill with congressmen. And I wanted a sort of path that would lead me to do more work on international development and aspects of that. And I came across GCE-US, and I've happily been here for 2 years now. And as a fellow for the last 2 years, my role, I wear many different hats, like Krista also mentioned, a lot of which involves managing and curating content for social media, building capacity across our network, our coalition, blog writing, and then also assisting with other various tasks and projects throughout the year.
Thanks so much. Could you tell us a little bit more about what your favorite aspects of your work with GCE-US is, and also just briefly give us an overview of what your why is, what draws you to this work?
Sure. I would say my favorite aspects of GCE-US's work includes attending meetings and events on such incredibly important topics, including girls' education, inclusive education, and education in emergencies. I learned so much from my colleagues and am inspired through those events to continue doing this work. And then I also really enjoyed blog writing. I've been able to research a lot of different topics and learn more about countries' cultures and new developments in education. And through those experiences, I've just overall grown so much professionally. And even in the midst of a pandemic, I've made friends, even though I haven't seen our team in person. That's always been great. And I know that these connections that I have will be lifelong, and I continue to grow and learn so much from them. My why goes a little back and definitely comes from personal experiences. I have a little brother that has a disability, and as a first generation American, my family's always been really supportive and kind of encouraged education as much as possible. Like Sartaj, my family also comes from India, so I understand and have, I have family members that were unable to complete their education solely because of harmful cultural gender norms and things like that. And I really believe that education is such a key part of a child's development and foundation. And through GCE-US, I've been able to advocate and speak up for aspiring learners who aren't always able to do so, and lead initiatives, work with leaders. Last year, I had the opportunity to make remarks when our former champion for education on the Hill, Congresswoman Nita Lowey, retired. And through the work, I feel that it's really rewarding, and I love constantly learning new things and working with experts. So.
Great, thank you so much. That was really powerful, and grateful for all your work with GCE-US. So last but not least, we're going to move on to Stephanie Pena. Hello, Stephanie. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at GCE-US.
Yeah, so my name is Stephanie Pena. I am a third-year PhD student at the School of Global Inclusion and Social Development at UMass Boston, and my research focuses on inclusive education in low and middle income countries, which is similar to the work that I'm doing here at GCE-US, which is our disability inclusive education work more broadly. And as we've referred to, I help to coordinate our inclusive education and early childhood community of practice, which consists of bi-monthly meetings where we share knowledge about best practices and collaborate on important advocacy work to expand inclusive education and inclusive early childhood services for children around the world.
Thanks so much. Could you give us a little bit more information about what those terms mean and ways that people can get involved with the community of practice?
Yes, absolutely. So a community of practice in this case really just refers to a group of professionals, advocates, students, teachers, and policymakers from around the world that gather to share and discuss information around a common area. And so in this case, it's inclusive education and early childhood education and development. So we believe that education starts in early childhood, and that term refers to that time period between a child's birth and about age 8. And we know that that is a really critical time for growth and brain development. And then inclusive education, that term can vary a bit, but we see it as really a process of addressing and responding to a diversity of needs for all learners through increasing participation in learning and reducing exclusion from education and from within education systems. So to get involved, we really, it's really quite simple. We're excited and we make it really easy for you to do so. We have an interest form, which we will put in the chat, and you can just fill it out. And we currently have over 190 members from 90 organizations in our community of practice, as well as advocacy teams that focus on 5 target institutions, which are UNICEF, USAID, Education, Cannot Wait, World Bank and Global Partnership for Education. So if you're interested, I encourage you to fill out the form, and you'll be up to date with all of our meetings and any other relevant information.
Thanks. And we have a meeting coming up on
Yes.
December 8th at 9:30 in the morning, correct? Eastern time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I just put a link to that in the chat as well. So if you could quickly tell us about your why and what draws you to this work.
Absolutely. So I've had the opportunity to, see firsthand how inclusive education really benefits all learners. And I believe when it's done effectively that it has the potential to really change lives. Looking at me, you probably wouldn't know that I have a learning disability. And I don't know if I would be where I am today if I didn't have the types of support throughout my education career. And so I know that I've been very privileged in that aspect, and I know that it's not a reality for a lot of people. So I work to really ensure that learners with disabilities aren't seen for what they can't do, but for what they can do. And I've dedicated my work and my research to really hold governments and funders and international development organizations accountable to really invest in inclusive education and see the value of it in inclusion, not just for the learners, but for society really as a whole.
Thank you so much. That's really powerful. And thank you for speaking about all that today. So I wanted to just close us out with a few ways that people can get involved. I know that we are at the top of the hour, but if you stick around, I'm going to share a little bit about that. And then we also have a few videos, one from the Director of Education Cannot Wait, as well as one of our board members, Ngozi Lawal. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly and give you all some more resources. So how can you get involved? How can you contribute to global education advocacy? Oh, there we go. So there are kind of three buckets. One is that you can give yourself, you can take action yourself, and then you can get others to get involved as well. So today is Giving Tuesday here in the US, which means that we're asking people to give. It's a really big day of giving, as well as just trying to spread the word about our work and what we do. So if you could become either a sustaining or a one-time donor, we'll put the link to our donation page in the chat. And then secondly, taking action, if you check out this link, then you'll see more resources for how to get involved with GCE-US and support global education. That could be advocating for a specific piece of legislation or signing a petition. So some of those are more focused for people who have a US address, but there are others there that are open to all. And then you can sign up for our action alerts, subscribe, which will get you access to our newsletter, which also will give you information on how to join our coalition meetings every month and other action items as they come up, as well as what work we're working on currently, what legislation might be in play, or being able to engage with some of the wonderful advocacy work that our speakers spoke about today. Then there's also the Inclusive Education and Early Childhood Community of Practice that Stephanie just spoke about. I put the links to that in the chat earlier. And then if you're interested in joining our coalition, which you can join as an individual or as an organization, you can email us at info@gceus.org. And then finally, we have a few resources here on various things that you can do in order to get involved and to get others involved as well. So this will give you some details on how to go about screening a film or creating a photo petition or writing a letter to an editor. And you can do these both virtually and in person. And then lastly, give us a follow on social media. We promote lots of coalition partner events here. So if you would like to get involved in anything that our speakers spoke about today, this is where you would find more information on that. So just a big thank you to all of our speakers today, as well as all of you for joining in. There was some really wonderful material covered today, and we hope it was helpful. If you have any further questions or would like to get connected to any of our speakers, you can email us at info@gceus.org. So thank you all for joining. And we're actually going to share some pre-recorded videos now, if you would like to stick around. So first, we're going to be sharing a video from our board member, Ngozi Lawal. So let me just pull that up quickly.
And in the chat box, everybody's thanking Taylor. Huge thanks to Taylor Rogers for organizing this today. And just a massive thanks to all of you for joining us and helping to spread the word. And Ngozi and Yasmin's remarks to follow are really powerful. So please join us and do reach out anytime if you have any questions or ways that you'd like to collaborate.
Great, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you to everyone else as well. So here is a video from one of our board members. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great.
You can be a regular. You don't have to be an elected official to do good or wealthy to support an important cause. You can be a regular, everyday person creating change and disrupting injustice, regardless of where you live or what you do for a living. My name is Ngozi Lawal, and I'm a board member of the Global Campaign for Education US since 2019. Our mission is to ensure universal, inclusive, high-quality education for all children and youth around the globe. At GCE-US, we believe that education is a basic human right for all, regardless of a child's ability, gender, or family income level. We work to advance many issues, including early childhood education, girls' education, inclusive education, safe schools, education in emergencies, and more. We work with more than 80 organizations within the US and across the world to advance this work. I hope after learning about GCE-US, you'll partner with us today by joining the movement and making a contribution. What's at stake? Well, imagine not being able to attend school because you were born with a disability, or because you're a girl, or because you were born poor. Perhaps you've been attending school, but a massive event like COVID interrupted your education, offering little hope for a timely reopening. Did you know that among refugees across the world, only 50% of children are actually attending primary school, and only 25% of children are in secondary school? These are just some examples of the kinds of issues we're working to solve. But we can't do the work alone. We need you. Today, we're asking for your partnership because we are stronger in numbers. More voices and more financial support will help us move the needle and ensure that more children and youth have the right to an education. So please consider making a donation today. If you can give $500, please consider doing so today. If you can donate $250 or $100, do it. If you can donate $50, do it. If you can give on a monthly or some recurring basis, do something, and please do it today. I thank you for your partnership and wish you a lovely, joyous holiday season. Thank you.
So it was a great call to action from our board member, Ngozi. And now I'm going to share a video from Yasmin Sharif, who's the director of Education Cannot Wait. And she's going to speak about a little more about the coalition work that we do and the coalition that we're a part of on a global level, which Ashanti spoke to a bit earlier. Sorry, I'm just going to pull up that video now.
Hello everyone, I am sorry for not being able to be with you in person today, but I will actually be in Cameroon and I'll think of you because I know that the work that we are doing at Education Cannot Wait would not have been possible without the drive, the passion, the commitment, the vision and the work of civil society and the global Coalition for Education. And I want to thank Jennifer, Julia, Tony, and all of you in civil society for changing the world. I truly believe it's civil society that's going to put education and emergencies at the forefront of the entire political scene out there. Slowly, slowly we are getting there. The funding is growing. We are making progress. And you were with Education Cannot Wait from day one. You actually were part of conceiving it and you have made it happen. Trust, at Education Cannot Wait, working closely with you. Civil society is on top of our agenda. Local civil society, the localization, the empowerment at local level, the grand bargain, and working with the development sector like education in the midst of a humanitarian crisis. That is the humanitarian development nexus. But we need resources. There are 128 million children and adolescents out there today as a result of COVID-19, wars, climate-induced disasters, as refugees, internally displaced. They need the Global Coalition for Education. They need you. They need civil society. And as Education Cannot Wait, we are privileged, we are blessed, we are happy and grateful that we are working this close together. You are Education Cannot Wait. We are the Global Coalition for Education in Emergencies. We are all one. Really love you guys. Sorry I can't be with you, but you are on my mind and in my heart always, and I admire you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's all we have for you today. Thank you for sticking around a bit longer. And a huge thank you again to all of our speakers. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And you can find a recording of this on our Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel afterwards if you'd like to point others to this video. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Taylor, and thank you all, Jennifer, on all.
Thank you, Taylor. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. We're so grateful for your partnership.